Nobody told him about the party. That was the point. That was the specific, deliberate, carefully coordinated point that approximately 23 people had managed to keep secret for 72 hours in an environment where secrets have the life expectancy of a soap bubble. A professional baseball clubhouse is not a place that holds information quietly. It is a place where everything moves: trade rumors, lineup decisions, injury updates, the particular social information that accumulates when 30-plus men spend 8 months in close proximity. Information does not stay still in a clubhouse. But this one had. 72 hours. 3 days. The time between the moment someone had first suggested the idea in a corner of the training room and the moment Ohtani pushed open the clubhouse door and stopped walking. He stopped completely. Both feet. Mid-step. The expression on his face in that moment became, within hours of the first photograph circulating, the thing that everyone was talking about. Not the decorations, which were considerable. Not the food, which someone had clearly thought about seriously. Not the banner, which will be addressed in a moment because the banner requires its own moment. His expression. It is worth describing carefully because it moved through several distinct phases in the space of approximately 4 seconds, and each phase communicated something different. The first phase was simple confusion. The pure, unperformed confusion of someone whose brain is receiving information that does not match any expectation it had prepared for. His eyes moved across the room quickly. Taking inventory. Processing. The decorated tables. The teammates standing in the particular arrangement of people who have been waiting and are now trying very hard not to look like they have been waiting. The food. The banner. The second phase arrived when the banner registered fully. It was handmade. Not printed by a vendor or produced by the Dodgers graphic design department with the clean lines and official fonts of organizational communication. Handmade. Marker on poster board. Large letters, slightly uneven, in the handwriting of someone who had never claimed to be an artist but had decided that sincerity mattered more than execution. It said, "Welcome back, Sho. We saved you a spot." The second phase of his expression was the phase that the cameras caught and the photographs preserved, and the people who had been in that room described afterward with the particular helplessness of people trying to put language around something that resisted language. It was not happiness exactly. It was larger than happiness and more complicated. The expression of someone receiving, all at once, the full weight of being cared for by people he had not known would care for him this specifically. The expression of someone who had spent days in a hospital being managed and monitored and carefully maintained, and who had just walked into a room where the dominant note was not management but love. The third phase was the one that made several of his teammates look away briefly. Not from discomfort. From the specific impulse to give a person a moment with their own feeling before it becomes something observed. His jaw tightened slightly. His eyes did something. He looked at the ceiling for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked back at the room and he smiled, and the smile was the kind that takes over the whole face and cannot be managed or reduced or made professional. The all-star gift came from Mookie Betts. He had brought it back in his carry-on. Not in checked luggage. Carry-on. The decision of someone who had decided that this particular object was not going to be left to the mercy of an airline baggage system. He had carried it through the airport and onto the plane and into the overhead compartment above his seat and through the arrival terminal and into his car and across Los Angeles and into the stadium and into the clubhouse, and had placed it on the table that had been designated, in the planning of the party, as the gift table. It was an all-star game commemorative item. Official. The kind produced in limited quantities and distributed to players who participated. The kind that Ohtani, by the specific circumstances of his hospitalization and the medical team's instructions and the decision that everyone had agreed was right but that had cost something nonetheless, did not have. Betts handed it to him personally. No speech. No preamble. He simply picked it up from the table and walked it over to where Ohtani was standing and placed it in his hands and said something quietly that only Ohtani heard. Ohtani looked at the object for a long time. Then he looked at Betts. What passed between them in that look is the kind of thing that happens in baseball clubhouses between men who compete together at the highest level and who have, through the accumulation of shared pressure and shared success and shared failure, developed a shorthand that does not require sentences. Betts gave a small nod. Ohtani returned it. The room understood that something had been completed. Something that the absence from the All-Star game had left open, and that this object, carried in a carry-on bag from the All-Star city to Los Angeles, had now closed. Robert slammed the desk at 2:17 in the afternoon. It happened in his office, which adjoins the clubhouse in the specific geography of a major league facility, and the sound carried through the wall with enough force that two players in the main room looked toward the door simultaneously. Not with alarm exactly. With the particular attention of people who know the difference between the sounds a building makes normally and the sounds it makes when something has changed. What had changed was a phone call. Roberts had stepped away from the party briefly. The call had come in on his cell phone. He had taken it standing near his desk, which is where he takes calls that require him to be standing. The people close enough to see him through the partially open office door described his posture changing during the call. Straight at first. Then forward. His free hand moving to the edge of the desk. Then the call ended. And the desk received the flat of his palm with a force that was not quite anger and not quite frustration, but something that occupied the specific territory between those two things where important decisions live before they have been made. He stood there for a moment. Both hands on the desk now. Head down. The posture of a man running something through his mind one more time before he commits to it. Then he straightened. Picked up his phone. Made a call of his own. The GM's decision came 40 minutes later. It was not announced at the party. It was not delivered in the celebratory atmosphere of a room full of teammates and handmade banners and all-star gifts carried in carry-on luggage. It came through the proper channels, in the proper language, with the proper notification to the appropriate parties. But everyone in that clubhouse knew something had shifted. Information moves in baseball environments. It moves through expression and body language and the specific quality of silence that falls in a room when the people who know something are trying to behave normally around the people who don't yet. The decision concerned Ohtani's return timeline. Not an extension of it. That was the first thing that needed to be understood when the information began moving. The 1-month projection had been the conservative public position, constructed with the deliberate caution of an organization that had learned, through the 15-page medical record and Dr. Elatrash's unambiguous instruction, that optimism was a liability in this particular situation. The GM's decision adjusted the internal target. Not the public one. The internal one. The number that the coaching staff and the medical staff and the front office work from when they are planning honestly rather than communicating carefully. He had moved it forward by 8 days. 8 days is not a dramatic revision. In the mathematics of a baseball season it is barely a rounding error. But in the specific mathematics of Ohtani's return to pitching, in the context of what the knee device and the 15-page document and the heavy bandaging had communicated about the complexity of what needed to heal, 8 days was significant. It meant the medical staff had seen something in the most recent assessment that the public timeline had not yet reflected. It meant the recovery was tracking ahead of the conservative projection. It meant Ohtani's body, which had been asked to do unprecedented things for several years and had now been asked to repair itself on a schedule that served October rather than convenience, was responding. Ohtani did not know about the 8 days when he was standing in the clubhouse holding the All-Star commemorative item that Betts had carried across the country for him. He found out later. In a separate conversation. In the measured, direct way that the Dodgers organization communicates with him about his own situation, not buffered through layers of representation but clearly and specifically and with enough detail that he can make his own meaning from it. When he was told, his response was not what the people who have followed him from a distance might have predicted. He did not express relief. He did not ask follow-up questions about the specific date or the planned schedule or the structure of the return. He asked one question only, and the question was not about himself. He asked whether the team needed him sooner. The person delivering the information paused before answering. It was a short pause. The pause of someone encountering, for perhaps the 100th time in their professional relationship with this particular athlete, something that did not fit the categories they had prepared for. They told him the team needed him healthy. He nodded. Then he walked back into the clubhouse where the party was still happening and the banner was still hanging, and Decopin, who had been allowed into the facility for the occasion in a decision that Roberts had approved without deliberating, was asleep under the gift table. He sat down next to Freddie Freeman. He did not say anything about the 8 days. He ate something. For the first time since the hospital doors had closed behind him, he looked, to the people in that room who knew him well enough to read it, like a man who was exactly where he was supposed to be.